I met Mark and some of his students, this is a secondary school in Tunbridge Wells, at a conference that I was chairing in London a couple of years ago. And the students just blew everyone away. They were so knowledgeable, so passionate, so excited about everything that they were doing, and they were just driving the agenda. And I was really quite inspired. We haven't been able to get the students here this year. We've just got Mark, but we'll do with him. I'm sure he'll be fine.
That's a picture we took of our school with a camera we borrowed from KCC. So it's not exactly one of my 6 tips, but ask your council, can you borrow their FLIR camera, F-L-I-R? It's an infrared camera. The kids thought it was the coolest gadget ever. They went around taking pictures of themselves and their mates. And of course we were using it to look at heat loss. If you go to the Skinner School website, there's lots more pictures on that, and it threw up all sorts of anomalies, heat sources in classrooms we didn't even know existed. And when the bursar saw those pictures, the first thing he did was instruct his ground staff to go and start finding out where those heat losses were coming from. So that's a freebie. What is a sustainable school? It's obviously something that we all aspire to. It's something that I think just extends that idea of care, that concept of care that all schools already do, a bit further. Caring for the energy we consume, caring for the waste we produce, caring for the food we serve our students. Okay, it's just consuming things and producing things, but caring about what it is we consume and produce. A good sustainable school, in my view, also has an integrated approach. It's absolutely critical that everybody in the school is engaged. Now, I don't mean 100% everybody. I just mean there's representatives from perhaps the bursarial staff, as well as the leadership group, as well as the catering staff and the ground staff, and the pupils and the governors and the parents. Everybody should know what is going on. So the more you can advertise your school, the more you can advertise the projects that you're doing, the better. The more times they're exposed to it, the more people will see that success that you're trying to achieve and buy into it. This also applies outside the school. We work very closely with a lot of secondary schools and primary schools in our local area. And to help us to do that, we have, fortunately, a lot of NGOs in our neighbourhood who've offered their services. And without them, I'm pretty sure some of the practical work that we do couldn't be done. Risk assessments, for example, kids were using tools. The third thing I'd say would define a sustainable school is you've got to get a buy-in to this concept. I'm sure you've all heard of the 8 doorways now, but this framework, I think, is actually a workable framework for schools, probably a bit more so than eco-schools, even though that's where I started out with the eco-schools 9 areas. The 8 doorways of the sustainable school just seems to manage to fit nicely into what we're trying to achieve in the curriculum. There's something called an S3 option for the CEF. Now, some of you who were in a previous workshop would have seen this S3. It's quite a daunting looking document. It's got 50 pages in, but I think it's an ideal place for a teacher to start to see whereabouts are you at this particular moment. Now, if you then show that to the head would be quite pleased to see it because also you've done something towards the CEF. However, that might trigger, if Ofsted come visiting, a visit to look at the S3 to make sure it's been assessed honestly. So careful about that. You can use it for your own good, but if you try to go public and show it to the head, that might trigger off consequences you're not ready for yet. But as a starting point, it's excellent. So having said that a sustainable school is all about care and sort of integrated approach and buying into the 8 doorways, it's interesting just to pause a little bit to see whereabouts you are now. There's 4 little pictures up there. Just think to yourself, are you at a traffic light situation? Just pause, waiting for something to happen, something to push you a bit further. Can you see the road stretching on ahead, unending, and you're travelling along at 100 miles an hour in your sort of gas-guzzling car? Or perhaps there's a slippery, wet road. You're not sure what's around the next corner, what's going to trip you up. Everyone will have different views about that, but it's worth thinking about a picture that represents your position at this point and where you want to be in the future. So the top tips. Okay, let's break it down. Vision, a choice of what you want to do, a plan, and finally some action. We started off our vision by dangling carrots in front of the departments, heads of departments, teachers. You know, they always have a what's in it for me attitude. And the same goes for the leadership group. At first, the leadership group weren't particularly interested in this little club that was meeting at lunchtimes, you know, doing its little club-like things, and I bet a lot of you are in that position. But once the results started to come in, once the money from grants started to come in, once the successes came in, they became more and more interested and more willing to support us. So a sort of concept of a carrot and a positive vision of what you want to do. Oops, go back one. A good little test that I give to my eco group, I said, you've got this idea, you want to do something. yes, sir, we want to do this and that. I said, can you draw it for me? If you can draw it and I can see what it is you're drawing, that's a good way for them to visualize what it is they want. They might come up with fantastic ideas, but if they can't draw it, generally it doesn't sort of work. And the same would go for you. If you have an idea you want to sell to your leadership group, just think, if I had to draw that idea, could I make it a nice simple sketch or a diagram, something to show them? So break it down into a simple vision. This is our organic garden busy at work. The next step of this is to make it self-irrigating, but we are firm believers that we have to start local. I know there's a global dimension to the doorways, and we never forget that, and we keep pushing that, but kids like practical stuff. The curriculum deals with the content. I think the eco-schools and the sustainable development deals with the context. And for most kids, the context is where they go to school, where they live, how they get to school. That's the stuff you need to focus on first, I think, the context. So keep it local, keep it to do with where your food comes from or how they get to school, and you'll find that kids will engage with that. They won't engage with the theoretical stuff about sustainable farming in India or something as worthy as that might be. You need a passionate and organised champion at pretty much every level, but don't expect that to happen at once. You've got to be patient about this and wait for these people sometimes to emerge from the woodwork. But it's amazing not only how many pupils, but how many teachers have hidden skills you're not aware of. There might be some teacher who's a fantastic gardener, but just doesn't advertise that fact. When you hear about that, and you mention you're doing a gardening project, usually they'll buy in and get engaged as well. So there are lots of champions at all levels, but I think the leadership group, you need to have somebody who've got the ear of in some way, and every school will have a different aspect about this, but an influence on the leadership group is good. The way we got into the leadership group was got our eco team to come to a leadership group meeting and to say, can we have 5 minutes at the beginning just to talk to the leadership group? And they gave a fantastic little presentation about what it is they learnt in year 7 about wind farms and things like that. These kids were now in year 9, and they still remember it 2 years later, and that sort of affected them. They realised that what they did in year 7 had an effect on them all those years later. They then went to the governors and did exactly the same thing. So the governors got to hear that these pupils were passionate and involved and wanted more of it. Keeping everyone informed is a matter of your own sort of personal influence, newsletters, websites, that sort of thing. And definitely, I keep saying this again and again, buy into the 8 doorways. Okay, the way we've organised this is to have sort of an overviewer, who's me. I don't get paid for it. I just look after the whole thing, and then teachers do little doorways. Don't, again, try to do all 8 at once. It's impossible. Well, it's not impossible. It just takes time to do that. These are our particular images for a sustainable doorway. The kids come up with these ideas themselves. The DFE version is a slightly more bland-looking pictures, but you can make a competition out of this and challenge your kids to come up with them. So second tip, it's about money for some people. I think particularly the bursar. The bursar likes to demonstrate savings, and it's perfectly possible to do that in a school. In terms of grants over the last 5 years, we have applied for and got about £100,000 worth of grants for our school. Yeah, we're not particularly well funded as a grammar school, but that money is coming externally, and of course they like that. But on top of that, there's the savings that you can make in various ways. This is what got the head on board. He started to see that this was a way in which the school could become more efficient. The grants, for example, for those solar panels came from some of the ones that were in the booklet that Anne gave out this morning.